Good evening. My name is Ken Jacobs. I'm the chair of UC Berkeley Center for Labor Research and Education, and we're part of the group that did research for the city of Seattle on their proposed minimum wage law, for Mayor Eric Garcetti in Los Angeles, and studies on other local living wage ordinances.
Sure,
and we've heard a lot about why people need...
Can I just clarify? You're speaking for others, right?
That's correct. I think there are 4 other people who ceded time.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
We've got you for 5 minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
So a lot of people have talked about the need for raising the minimum wage. I want to talk a little bit about the research. What do we know? What happens when minimum wage is increased, and especially at the local level? To date, there are now 14 local governments, cities and counties, that have passed minimum wage laws. Many are in California, but they're spread across the country. And that ranges from medium-sized cities like, or large to medium cities, San Jose, San Francisco, to smaller cities like Santa Fe, Richmond, and Berkeley. And while no two cities are exactly alike, the research on what's happened really sheds light on what we could expect in Mountain View. So when we look at the city of Santa Fe 10 years ago raised the minimum wage. Santa Fe is a city of about 69,000 people. The residents of the city make about half the county. And they raised their minimum wage at the time 65% higher than the local surrounding county. That actually went up to 84% at one point. And researchers at the University of New Mexico Bureau of Business and Economic Research looked at what was the impact of that law, comparing it to restaurant growth and retail growth to other surrounding areas and to Albuquerque, other city nearby, and found no impact on overall unemployment or employment in low-wage industries. And some of my colleagues at UC Berkeley did a similar study where they took over a 16-year period. They looked over a 16-year period every time there have been different minimum wages across state borders, right? So we have, as 23 states have minimum wages higher than the federal minimum wage. So they're looking at, you've got Spokane, Washington, which has a minimum wage 44% higher than Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, right across the border. So what happened, and they're looking this all over the country over the 16-year period. So what happens to, again, they looked at restaurant growth as an area of high low-wage workers, and again found no measurable impact on employment. So why is this? How can this be? And one part of this is when we look at what are the jobs that are affected by minimum wage. If you think of a city like Mountain View, you have some group of jobs like security guards, janitors, cafeteria workers in the high-tech industry, where those wages are just an extremely small part of the overall cost of operations and aren't going to make a noticeable change. And then you look at other areas like restaurants where they're a larger cost, but they're very location-specific. So say in the retail industry, wages make up on average about 11% of operating cost. We estimate in San Francisco a $15 minimum wage phased in over 3 years would on average raise retail operating costs by 0.2%, and the same would raise operating cost in restaurants by 3%. So, well, how's all this paid for, right? None of this is free, and the main effects that we do see an increase in restaurant prices. So every 10% increase in the minimum wage leads to about a 0.7% increase in restaurant prices. So in San Francisco, going up to $15 an hour would raise restaurant prices by about 2.7% or 27 cents on a $10 hamburger. When the other main way you see it, the adjustment is you see that real declines in turnover in those cities where they have the higher minimum wage, and increases in worker performance and customer service, etc. And that brings savings to employers. And we estimate about somewhere around 20-25% of the cost is absorbed through those means. So, okay, well, what does all this mean for a city like Mountain View in terms of what could Mountain View absorb around a higher minimum wage? And one of the ways economists look at this is minimum wage is a ratio of median wage. Overall, in average OECD countries, it's about 50%. The height in the US in 1968 was about 55%. The median wage in Santa Clara County is little over $32 an hour, meaning that $10 would be a third of the median wage, and 15 phased in over a few years would be about 46% of the median wage. That's well within range of what we've seen elsewhere. It's helpful. We look at the average wage increase in the local minimum wages has been about 46%, and the average yearly wage increase phased in has been about 16% a year. But getting back to this earlier question about what does it mean for cities to have different rules, and just to say quickly, because I'm running out of time, we already do in many areas like tax policy and regulation, but in our decentralized system, cities really are the laboratories of democracy, and we've seen in these kinds of wage policies, when one city does it, it creates a race to the top and others tend to follow suit.
Right. Hey, Councilmember Inks, I think, has a question for you.
So if you mandate 15,
I turned you on.
oh, okay. If you mandate a $15 minimum wage in an establishment that is paying a range of wages, including low wage, the very, very lowest wages, and then even higher for supervisors, managers, and so forth, with a, say, 50% increase on the minimum wage, what does your research show, or what are the effects for compression in
Good question, and all the estimates we've done in the various cities, we take that into account, that you both have people who are under the minimum wage move up to the minimum wage, and then people who are right at and above the minimum wage also tend to get a raise so that employers can maintain some wage differential. So it phases out fairly quickly, but in the period in the space right above the minimum wage, you do also have increases.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Kasperzak?
Yes, thank you. So I give you a little extra time to go back to the issue of multiple minimum wages in a county. Are you aware of any jurisdictions in the United States right now where there is a county with multiple local minimum wages?
Well, in Alameda County right now, Berkeley has minimum wage. Oakland's about to pass something that'll be a little bit different. Nearby in Contra Costa, Richmond has its own minimum wage.
That is a different county, and
Right.
Oakland right now does not have a different minimum
Oakland,
wage.
but they're going to vote on it in November. Berkeley has its own minimum wage.
Right, but that's it.
That's it right now. From all the discussions that are happening in Alameda County, I expect we're going to see a few different ones very soon.
What can you speak to the pragmatic issues of a small business owner in Mountain View who has employees that do work in 6 different cities in the county, and how is that employer supposed to deal with that?
Well, the best method would be if Mountain View chose to raise minimum wage, that other cities would look at that and see that as an example and follow suit. And I think we might be able to expect some of that over time. But we do have plenty of examples of this. There was a very interesting NPR story about the San Jose minimum wage, where there's a shopping mall that half of it's in San Jose and half of it's in Santa Clara. And so you had employers that had workers on both sides of the mall, and they paid different wages on both sides of the mall. And what particular employer ended up doing was moving workers back and forth to help level out the hours so everybody got a wage increase. Interestingly, the employers on the side of the mall that didn't raise their wages were losing workers because they wanted to go earn more. And so some of them started doing other things to retain employees, like giving more flexible schedules or working schedules around people's ability to go to school. So those workers ended up benefiting as well. So even there, by doing that in the competition, it led to some race to the top. But we do have a whole history of this. Your tax policies aren't the same as the cities next door. Your regulations are different. That is the decentralized way that America has chosen and California has chosen to do public policy in our city areas. So businesses deal with this on a daily basis across a wide area of regulation.
In your opinion, is there a practical limit to the number of different wages you could have in a county?
My view would be...
Could you have 15 different minimum wages?
You could. The best outcome would be if cities then would get together and say, let's all go in the same direction.
Right.
And the biggest example of that we have is Washington, D.C., Montgomery County, Maryland, and Prince George's County, Maryland, where Washington was looking at doing something and the others ended up all going in the same direction.
Kind of like what we're trying to do with San Jose, maybe. Anyways.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.